have a foul smell, so we don't eat onion and garlic. And furthermore, as we discussed before, these generate, the foods of a particular mode generate those qualities within us. So foods that have a bad smell will also generate tamasic qualities, onion, garlic included. Therefore, onion, garlic are examples of food in the mode of ignorance, although sometimes these foods are also classified under the category of the mode of passion. But generally they are considered in the mode of ignorance. And meat, of course, smells terrible. What is the meat that people eat? It's decomposed flesh. It's a decomposed carcass, isn't it? To use very blunt words. Do you know why the Europeans from Portugal, Spain and England came to India some centuries ago? What was the main reason for them to come?
Trade?
You know, Vasco da Gama came, I think it was my school history, 1498 or something like that. For spices. Because in tropical countries you can grow spices naturally and abundantly. And what use were the spices to the Europeans?
They hide the smell of the decomposing.
They act as preservatives and they hide the smell. And because they generate they have a good smell, so then you use spices in order to mask the smell, the foul smell of the decaying meat. And it also helps to preserve it for some time. Because in those days they didn't have refrigerators and all that, so they didn't have ways to store the meat. So they wanted spices. So trade in spices was flourishing at that time, and primarily because of this. So therefore meat is like that. Meat is yatayamam, even though you may cook it, but by the time it reaches you in order to cook, we don't know how many days or weeks have elapsed before it comes to you, and then you cook it. So definitely food in the mode of ignorance. Then paryushitam. Paryushitam means decomposed. So meat is of course decomposed, but even let's say fruits that have decomposed have become overripe, that is also not to be eaten. Then it becomes food in the mode of ignorance. So a same fruit may be in the mode of goodness when it's just ripe. It may be in the mode of passion when it's underripe. And it may be in the mode of ignorance when it's overripe. How many of you have had a raw mango? Yes. Raw mango is very delicious. Children especially love it. And it's got that tangy, sour taste to it. And so you take it with a little bit of salt and chili powder and this and that, and it's like a delicacy that people like to have, yes? So when it's raw, it's in the mode of passion. A little something is okay, not too much. When it's ripe, just ripe, it's in the mode of goodness. Sweet, juicy, nourishing, delicious. Okay, I won't speak more unless you start salivating. And when it's overripe, then it becomes food in the mode of ignorance. So that is paryushtam. The next quality is uchishtam. Uchishtam means that it is the remnants of somebody else's meal. Let's say, I find this happening very much here, where people are sitting together, they dip into each other's plates and they eat. That's not really something that's a culture thing to do. And whatever's left behind, you just eat that. The exception to this, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur and the other acharyas mention is, this does not apply to the remnants of food eaten by the Supreme Lord and by His great devotees, the saintly persons. That is helpful for us to do, but not ordinary food eaten by everybody else.
If prasad is getting wasted by somebody?
If prasad is getting wasted by somebody, well, generally we'll come to that when we talk of serving. We have some journey left to go before we conclude. So we'll talk about that when we speak of serving and honoring prasadam. Actually, this topic is so big. We could do with another 3-hour session. So I'm trying to condense some of these things and being very brief about it. So let's see, we'll touch that topic. If I forget, you please remind me. So Uchishta, then Amedhyam. Amedhyam means that which is untouchable, which is ritually impure and which is unfit to be offered in sacrifice or in yajna. Basically anything that is unofferable to Krishna. There's so many substances like that. So what are examples of foods in the mode of ignorance? Meat, fish, eggs, alcohol, onion, garlic, mushrooms. Why mushrooms? It's fungus, because it's a fungal product, And also, generally, as far as devotees are concerned, we also avoid soya. We also avoid a kind of dal called masoor dal. Why do we avoid it? These two items?
High protein.
Very high protein. So anything that is extraordinarily high protein is also something that is considered in the modes of passion and ignorance. So we avoid them. So having talked about these different types of foods, now can you, what is the time now, please?
11:25. 11:25.
Okay. So what we'll do is, we'll go on for a while more and then we'll break for 10 minutes or so. Yes? Okay, can I have the next slide? Okay, so as I mentioned earlier, foods in the 3 modes will produce qualities associated with those modes. For example, sattvic foods will gradually develop wisdom, rajasic foods will develop greed and lust, tamasic foods will develop lethargy. Now these things will take time naturally. So it's not that somebody starts taking sattvic foods and say, I haven't become wise overnight. These things don't happen overnight. Gradually, as you start doing it, gradually they start making an impact on your consciousness. And then you go on and on and on and you start seeing the difference. So therefore, at the very least, we should be vegetarian. Better than that, we should eat sattvic foods. And better than that, we should offer the sattvic food to Lord Krishna and take prasadam. So can we have the next slide? Vegetarianism, especially sattvic foods. So vegetarianism and sattvic food reflects and fosters the culture of compassion, number 1. And second, the culture of purity of thought, word and deed. This is the benefit of vegetarianism. Now, vegetarianism in itself is a topic that can take up a few hours of discussion. And naturally, we don't have the time now to discuss it. But just in very brief, these are the 2 main reasons, the strongest points in favor of vegetarianism. There are many others. There are economic reasons, there are karmic reasons, there are many others. It's a topic in itself. Now, I want to ask you, how does vegetarianism reflect and foster a culture of compassion? Yes?
So ahimsa is the principle.
Ahimsa is the principle, okay. Ahimsa means?
The principle of non-violence.
Principle of non-violence, okay.
Hurting or not causing any hurt to any other living entity. So by the mode of vegetarianism, we are inflicting the minimal possible hurt or violence to any living entity. By being non-vegetarian, one is hurting the other entities, the animals and the higher entities and the plants.
Right, excellent. So, vegetarianism reflects and fosters a culture of compassion because it is based on the spirit of kindness and compassion to all living entities. We do not, we are not cruel to animals and to birds. We don't kill them to eat them. We don't cause pain to them. Whereas non-vegetarian food is a product of cruelty, massive cruelty. Personally speaking, for the life of me, I cannot understand how any civilization that calls itself civilized or cultured can eat meat and cause so much cruelty and violence to helpless living entities. The kind of fear that animals come under when they're approached for slaughter, to be slaughtered, is something that will make you shudder. The kind of cruelty that goes on in slaughterhouses, and there are many YouTube videos on this. It's unwatchable, actually speaking. Completely abominable, despicable, it is just beyond words. And one wonders how it isn't that there is not a huge uproar of protest against such enormous cruelty and violence. So in vegetarianism, at least we avoid that cruelty. Some cruelty exists in the sense that you have to kill plants, but that cruelty is very, very, very small in compared to the pain and cruelty that is inflicted upon animals and birds when they are killed for food, especially when there is plenty of vegetarian food available all over the world. So therefore, vegetarianism, it also breeds a culture of compassion. We realize that I want to be vegetarian because I don't want to be cruel to helpless living entities who deserve our love and our protection. So this is the first and the strongest argument in favor of vegetarianism. Second, why does it foster and reflect a culture of purity of thought, word and deed?
In Sattvic.
Because what we eat, it rises to the mind.
Yes, because as we discussed, the Chandogya Upanishad says, the essence of the food we eat rises to the mind and becomes the mind. Yes? So therefore, if the food is pure, then our thought becomes pure. Now, sometimes people ask, because people like to present counter arguments. So they say, all right, we accept this point that, because it's a point that can't be contested, that there is enormous cruelty in the killing of animals and birds. All right, suppose we were to eat meat without causing any cruelty. First of all, how is that possible? You may use stunning equipment to stun them and then kill them and so on, but that's cruelty. And also we have no right to take somebody else's life. So therefore still the argument holds that killing somebody with cruelty is worse and without cruelty is still bad enough. Then they may argue further and say, what if we eat the animal after it has died a natural death? Good question, right? Valid question. It takes care of the first point. Now we are not cruel. We have not hurt the animal or the bird. But then the second point has to be considered. That if you indeed want to be a civilized and cultured person, then you must try to foster in your own life a spiritual culture. You must work towards spiritual development as the ultimate goal of your life. And therefore you must eat food that nourishes the spiritual aspect of your consciousness. So even if you eat food or meat of animals that have died naturally, still it is tamasic food. Because all the other qualities of the tamasic foods that we discussed earlier are present in this. It is stale, decomposed, unclean, etc. So therefore, vegetarianism reflects and fosters these two types of culture. And one last point before we break. Can we have the next slide? But we are not just vegetarians. We follow prasaditarianism. So we are not vegetarians, we are prasaditarians. What does it mean to be prasaditarians? Prasaditarians means that we eat only prasadam, food that is offered to Lord Krishna. And what prasadam is and other aspects of it we'll discuss after the break. But suffice it to say here at this time that prasaditarianism is an improved, much superior version of vegetarianism. Therefore, it greatly strengthens the culture of compassion and purity which exists in vegetarianism, and further, it also reflects and fosters the culture of devotion to Lord Krishna. This is very, very important. Remember the example of the soil and the plant that I gave in the beginning of the talk, of how you need a favorable atmosphere or the soil condition for the plant to grow. So similarly, the culture of food is a very important aspect in facilitating the growth of devotion and the culture of devotion. So the ultimate culture of food is to adopt prasaditarianism. So we'll stop here. We'll meet after 10 minutes. What is the time now, please?
11:35.
11:35. So we will meet at 11:45. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.